we can't really draw.
So please don't come for us, Miss Godfrey.
So this is one of Erickson's theories called trust versus mistrust. And in this time, I was a little kid and I had witnessed my brothers fighting. But one of my older brothers ended up getting very violent towards my other brother and got on top of him and started to bang him on the floor. He started banging his head on the tile floor, and me as a little kid, I got very scared and I was crying about it, trying to get him to stop. So later that night, I was crying in my room in the corner, and he walked in and I got very scared. I had never been scared of my brother, but until that day I was, and he tried to comfort me and tell me like not to cry and to not be afraid of him, but all I could think about was like what if he could do that to me, and it was horrible. And another theory was autonomy versus shame and doubt. Now, in this one, I saw there was a box of toys on the top shelf in my garage, and we used to hang the clothes there. And one day when I was a little kid, I had asked my mom if I could get it, and she had told me no, that I was too little and that I couldn't do it. And me over here, I was like, actually, it was like, I came up with an idea, and I thought, I was like, when she leaves, I'll try it. So I had decided to grab a bunch of boxes and like a couple stools and climb on top of them so I could reach. So I could reach the box of toys that my mom had said that I could not get. Well, the box could not hold me up. So I ended up falling, and like I was still holding on to the railing of the shelf, and due to my weight, it broke, and everything along with the boxes fell. All the clothes that was hanging, everything. The like I was hanging on the bar, and I was just crying cuz I couldn't, like, I didn't know what to do. I just realized like I had broken the shelf, and I knew my mom was going to get mad at me, which she did. She came in yelling at me, telling me, "What are you doing? Why did you do that?" And I was just like, "Oh, my plan backfired." So I was hanging on the shelf railing and I was crying because I couldn't get down and I was scared and I knew my mom was going to beat me. So my mom, she came in all mad at me, but she carried me down and she put me down and told me, "I told you not to do that." And I ended up telling her I was sorry because I realized I had messed up. And yeah, she was just giving me a whole lecture on why I shouldn't have done that.
So moving on, we're going into initiative versus guilt. So there's little me, and then my parents, of course, my mom and my dad. And so we were in our van, driving down the street, going to the store. And so when we were coming back home to our little house, you know, my parents were walking in front of me. They were going to put the groceries down. And I was coming up behind them. And I was just like a little bored. And then I noticed some flowers. And so then I started picking them and playing with them and putting them in my hair, doing all the stuff little kids do with flowers. And my mom realized what I was doing. And so she was like, "What are you doing?" I mean, that kind of sounds confusing, but that's okay. You get the point. And so basically, I got kind of scared. I was like, oh my gosh. I was thinking that something was going to happen. And she was just pointing at me. And she was yelling. And I was just crying. And so eventually, I yelled back because we're little kids. And so I told her I was running away. And she got kind of upset. But, it was okay. She let me go so I could figure stuff out, I guess. But I just ended up going to my neighbor's house. And so I went to my neighbor and she was a little confused. She was like, "What's going on with this little girl?" And I had told her that my mom yelled at me. And so she realized what had happened. And she kind of smiled to make me feel better, and she told me that it was because she loved me. And so I felt kind of guilty, and so I was like, oh, like, thank you for telling me that. So eventually I went back home, like, trying to look for my mom. And I was coming back with my love and affection, and I was like screaming trying to find her. And so she came outside with her arms open wide, and we regained that love after all that guilt. So next up, we're moving on to industry versus inferiority. So I was going to school. What, Maripaz? School? Okay. So I was going to Park Ridge in Corona because that's where I used to live. And so there's me, and I was so happy I was gonna go to school, and I was excited, and I was like, yay, school, like it's gonna happen. So then, moving on, we were going into the classroom, and there was a bunch of desks, and it was like a bunch of kids all around me, and everybody was like kind of being loud, and like I guess everybody like already knew each other, or like they're kids, so they make friends easily. But not me, because I was scared. I was like, oh my gosh, a new school. So I was just sitting in the corner, minding my own business. And then there was this girl, and she like kind of like was next to me, sort of ish. And she was just like looking a little happy, and I was like, oh, okay. Like I was confused because like I didn't know anybody. So I was just thinking, I was like, okay, like I don't know anyone. And so then eventually, like, she had told me, she was like, oh, like, let's be friends. And so I was just like kind of confused, but then I was like excited that like I was finally gonna have a friend. And so, like, I had told her, like, all happily, I was like, okay, like, I'm gonna have a friend. And she was excited too, um, that we were gonna be friends. So she was like, yay. And so, recess time came along, and there was like some swings, and so we got to them first. So we were just like swinging, having fun, and like talking to each other, and we would like see like who would be like the fastest and stuff. And so then there was these and so then there was these, you know, angry looking kids. Looked kind of irritated. And so like we had gotten off like to see like what was up with them. And so I was just like a little like confused, like, oh, what are these like boys doing? And so they were like, who do you think you are? Um and like I guess they were second graders. And so like I was just there, and like my friend was there too. Like she looked kind of upset, like worried about what was gonna happen. And so like I had explained to them, like I was like kind of worried, like, but I was like, okay, whatever, like I'll just tell them that I'm new. So that's what I did. And then they had told me, like, okay, like why are you hanging out like with this loser? And so like I was kind of confused. I was like, oh, like why would they call her a loser? And like I realized that she was sad. And so like she was getting upset, and I was like still confused. I was like, okay, like I'm new, like I don't know like what's going on around here and all this other stuff. And so the second grader had told me like, oh, if you hang out with her, then you're a loser too. And so like I didn't really care about it because I was like, okay, they're second graders, like whatever. And I saw that she had started crying because like they kept calling her a loser and stuff. And so I got kind of like mad. I was like, why would they call her a loser? So I was like, no, like I'm gonna stay with her. And so then like he's like, okay, like losers, like he just called this name. And I was just like kind of like shocked. But then like they walked away. And so like when we were together, like we were both kind of sad. Like it was like a shocking like experience that like he had called us losers. So we were like both sad, and like we weren't doing anything. And so then the next day, I didn't realize that she was gone. Well, like she was gone. And so I was just at the swing sets like by myself, and then the second graders came with like um more friends, and then like he had came up to me and started like smiling. He's like, "Oh, what are you doing, loser?" Um and I had like told him like, "Oh, nothing," because I didn't want any trouble. I was like, "Okay, like I don't want anything bad to happen." And then he started calling me names, like saying you're a chicken. And so, that kind of got me sad. And so the days went by on the calendar. And so I would like still be kind of sad that like he would be talking and calling me names, and my friend too. Like eventually she came back. Um and so, one day I went home, and my parents were outside, and they had just told me that we were moving. And so I was excited. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like we're going somewhere else, like away from all this other stuff." So then that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands, and I went to a teacher. And I started like telling the teacher about the boy, like what had happened. And so she was like kind of worried. And so like I finally owned up to it, like I was crying. And so like she was kind of like mad. She was like, "Oh," like she told the boy, she was like, "Oh, come apologize." And so like he looked kind of like weirded out, and so he came, and then like he had apologized to me, and the teacher was kind of happy, and he was like, "Oh, sorry." And so then we moved to Mobile, Morna Valley. And so I felt happy. Like I had made new friends, and you know, I felt better. So that was our video on Erickson's theoretical stages.
So make sure to like, comment, and grade us.